Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I grew up in a part of the country people only ever drove past, never to. The kind of place where the road narrows without warning, cell service drops to one bar and stays there, and the land stretches so wide and empty that you start measuring distance in fence posts instead of miles. Our house sat alone on a few dozen acres outside a blink-and-you-miss-it town called Holler Ridge, tucked into a low valley. Most maps didn't bother labeling. I didn't realize how isolated it was until I left for a while and came back. Back then, though, it was just home. Our place was an old two-story farmhouse with a sagging front porch and paint that never stayed white for long. My mom kept a small peach orchard south of the house. Nothing commercial, just enough trees that every summer she'd talk about the good year, even when the fruit came out bruised or half-eaten by birds. To the west was open pasture that rolled out toward a tree line, split by a dirt driveway lined with cottonwoods and pecan trees older than anyone in my family. But the north and east sides? That was woods. Not the kind people hike through on weekends. These were thick, unmanaged stretches that ran for miles. Oak, pine, undergrowth so dense you could lose a dog 10 feet in. Everyone around there had stories about those woods. Missing cattle, broken fences, sounds at night that didn't line up with anything familiar. Most of us learned early not to go wandering. By the time this happened, I was 19 and thought I knew better anyway. I'd just started working at a small carpentry shop in town, Ridgeway Custom Wood, a place run by a stubborn old guy named Luther Cobb who built cabinets like he was still working in the 70s. He didn't open early, ever. Luther believed mornings were for thinking and didn't unlock the shop until 10 on the dot. In summer, that schedule felt like a blessing. In winter, it meant driving home in pitch dark, usually tired, usually alone. I didn't have much choice when it came to transportation. I was driving an '87 Chevy pickup that rattled like it was held together by habit and rust. The headlights were dim even after I replaced the bulbs twice, and the heater worked only when it felt like it. December that year came hard and fast. Cold settled into everything. Bones, soil, engines. Nights felt heavier, like the dark had weight to it. Luther had me staying late most evenings finishing orders before Christmas, and I didn't complain. I needed the money. I was saving to move out, maybe get a place closer to town. The night everything went wrong was a Tuesday. I remember because my mom had made chili, and I'd skipped dinner telling her I'd be home before 10. That didn't happen. I'd messed up a dresser drawer, cut it wrong, rushed it. Luther noticed just as he was locking up. "You leave it like that, customer'll notice," he said, tapping the edge with a knuckle. "Fix it." So I stayed. By the time I shut off the lights and stepped outside, it was close to midnight. The cold hit me like a wall. My breath fogged instantly, and the wind carried that sharp winter smell. Damp leaves, distant smoke, something metallic. I just wanted to get home. Normally, I'd take the highway straight back, but when I reached the on-ramp, red and blue lights blocked the road. An accident, maybe. State troopers had cones set up, waving everyone off. "No traffic through," one of them said. "Could be a while." I didn't argue. I turned around and took the back way, the long way. Miles of dirt roads and narrow lanes cutting through wooded land that barely anyone used after dark. About 10 minutes in, that familiar unease crept in. Not fear exactly, more like awareness, like the feeling you get when someone's standing behind you before you hear them. I shook it off. I'd driven those roads 100 times. Another mile passed, then another. The road worsened, potholes and exposed roots where rain had eaten away at the dirt. I slowed down, easing through one rough stretch when the truck jolted hard. A loud pop echoed through the trees. The steering wheel jerked, and I fought it long enough to get the truck onto the shoulder. Flat tire. "Perfect," I muttered. I climbed out, breath puffing, boots crunching on gravel. I swung open the tailgate and climbed into the bed to grab the spare. That's when my stomach dropped. The toolbox was open. Not just open, pried apart, bent metal, broken latch. Everything inside was gone. Tools, spare tire, jack, even the cheap emergency kit I kept back there. I stood there longer than I should have, staring like maybe it would fix itself. Someone had stripped it clean. Out there, in the middle of nowhere. I checked my phone. No signal. If I'd been smart, I would have stayed put, waited for daylight. Old Ray Mullen, who lived a few miles down, drove that road every morning around 8. He would have helped without a second thought. But I was tired, cold, angry at myself, and convinced I could make it. Home was maybe 6-7 miles away, so I locked the truck, slung my old rucksack over my shoulder, and started walking. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. My boots scraped against gravel, the sound carrying farther than it should have. After a while, I noticed something else, movement, not constant, just enough to make me listen harder. A rustle here, a snap of a twig there. I told myself it was deer, but the sound kept pace with me. Every time I slowed, it slowed. When I picked up speed, it followed. I stopped and turned once. The road behind me was empty. A little farther on, the trees opened into a small clearing where the moonlight actually touched the ground. That's when I heard him. "Hey there, boy." The word boy cracked sharp at the end like he meant it to. I turned. He stood at the far edge of the clearing, half in shadow. Tall. Too tall. Long coat hanging nearly to his boots. A wide-brimmed hat pulled low over short gray hair. But what froze me wasn't him. It was the animal beside him. At first glance, it looked like a dog. Big, black. Then my eyes adjusted. Its body was wrong. Too lean. Shoulders too high. Legs longer than they should have been. It stood rigid, eyes locked on me like it was waiting for permission. My legs refused to move. "What you doing out here this late?" the man asked, voice calm. Too calm. I swallowed. Truck broke down. Just headed home. He took a step closer. "Road ain't safe at night," he said. "A lot of things wander." The dog never blinked. He came close enough that I smelled him. Old cigarettes, damp wool, something sour underneath. He smiled, but only his mouth did. "Be careful, boy," he said softly. "Not everything out here means well." Then he stepped back. The brush swallowed him whole. When my legs finally worked again, they gave out. I hit the ground shaking, lungs burning. I didn't wait to calm down. I got up and ran. Didn't stop until I saw the glow of our porch lights. That's when I heard it again. "Hey there, boy," right behind me. I didn't look back until I crossed into the yard. He stood at the tree line, watching. Then he was gone. The next morning, my dad listened quietly as I told him everything. When I finished, he nodded once. "Probably old Silas Greer," he said. "Lives out past the North Woods. Folks say he ain't right." I asked how he knew where I was going. Dad didn't answer. We found my truck untouched. No sign of tools, no tracks, nothing. I don't take the back roads anymore, and I don't walk alone at night. Some things out there aren't lost, they're waiting. I grew up in a place people only talked about when they were explaining how far they lived from anything worth doing. It wasn't a town, not really. Calling it a village felt generous some days. A handful of streets, a small row of shops that closed early, and fields stretching out in every direction like the land was slowly trying to swallow the place whole. If you stood at the right spot near the old footpath and looked out far enough, you could convince yourself nothing else existed beyond it. Everyone knew everyone. That wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. By the time I was a teenager, I knew which houses argued at night, which families had money problems, and which men you didn't make eye contact with in the pub. News didn't travel fast there. It didn't need to. It lingered. It stuck. If you messed up once, people remembered it longer than you did. I spent most of my childhood wanting to leave. My parents were decent people, tired in the way adults get when life doesn't turn out how they pictured it. My dad worked maintenance jobs wherever he could find them. My mom cleaned offices in the early mornings. Neither of them complained much, but I noticed the way they went quiet when bills came in. By 19, I was desperate for space. The city was only about 25 minutes away by bus, but mentally it felt like another world. Lights stayed on late. People walked fast and didn't care who you were. Nobody asked about your family or your past. The problem was the bus. There was one route in and one route out. The last bus back left the city at 8 sharp. Miss it, and you were stranded unless you had money for a taxi or friends willing to put you up. Most nights, I watched that clock like it was a countdown timer to boredom. 8 o'clock meant the night was over before it ever really began. That December, things felt heavier than usual. I just quit a job I hated, stacking shelves overnight at a place that smelled like cardboard and bleach. I told myself I'd find something better, but weeks passed and nothing stuck. I slept late. I stayed up later. I felt restless in a way I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding dramatic. That's when I started going to the casino. Not because I loved gambling. I didn't. I liked the noise. The constant movement, the feeling that time didn't matter inside those walls. You could sit there for hours and nobody would rush you out. Most nights I went with friends. That night I went alone. I remember standing in my room pulling on a jacket that wasn't warm enough, checking my pockets. "Don't stay late," my mom called from downstairs. "I won't," I lied automatically. The bus ride in was uneventful. Same cracked seats, same fogged windows, same driver who never smiled. I got off near the city center and felt that familiar lift in my chest, the sense that something might happen. Inside the casino, everything was warm and artificial. Lights reflected off polished floors. Machines chimed constantly. I played blackjack because it felt simple, controllable. It wasn't. Within 2 hours, I was broke. I stared at the table longer than I should have, like the cards might rearrange themselves out of pity. They didn't. I checked my phone. 7:12 p.m. "Great," I muttered. I left immediately, heart sinking as I hurried through the streets. By the time I reached the bus stop, the digital sign already read, "Departed." I stood there staring at it, breathing hard, feeling stupid. A taxi would have cost more than I'd lost. Calling a friend wasn't an option. Everyone lived across the city or had work in the morning. That left the late bus. It didn't stop in the village itself, it stopped near the woods. I didn't love that, but I told myself I'd walked it before. The bus ride back was quiet, almost eerie. A couple sat whispering upstairs. A man slept with his hood pulled over his face. I took a seat alone and replayed every bad decision of the night. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice my stop until the bus was already slowing past it. "Wait!" I hit the button too late. The driver didn't look back. The doors opened at the next shelter and cold air rushed in like punishment. I stepped off and immediately felt the wet soak into my shoes. December had turned the snow into slush. Everything smelled damp and metallic. I stood there alone, streetlights humming softly, and weighed my options: road or woods. I sighed and headed toward the path. I told myself I'd be home in 15 minutes. I told myself I'd be fine. I was wrong. I crossed the road and stepped onto the path without stopping long enough to change my mind. The entrance looked the same as it always had during the day, narrow, boxed in, familiar. But at night it felt smaller, like it had shrunk when no one was watching. Chain link fence to my right, wooden posts and wire fencing to my left. Beyond that, open fields I couldn't see anymore. Just darkness where they used to be. My shoes squelched with every step. "Just get through it," I said quietly, mostly to hear my own voice. The path sloped slightly downward, gravel giving way to mud. Somewhere far off, I heard a train horn, long and hollow, echoing through the cold air. It made everything feel more exposed. The railway bridge came up fast. Concrete walls damp with streaks of rust, Graffiti layered over itself like people had been arguing there for years. My footsteps sounded louder under it, sharper, bouncing back at me. I slowed instinctively. Nothing happened. I passed through and the space opened up into the flats. During the day, it was ugly but harmless. At night, it felt unfinished, like someone had cleared the land and then walked away halfway through the job. The factory ahead of me sat dark and silent, windows black, chain gates locked. Old car shells lay half sunk in the mud, tires gone, frames rusted thin. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. No wind, no distant traffic, no animals. I reached up and pulled my headphones out, letting them hang around my neck. The silence pressed in immediately, thick and uncomfortable. I kept walking, but slower now. That was when the feeling started. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was the same sensation you get when you're about to step into traffic and your body reacts before your brain catches up. Like something behind me mattered. I stopped, listened. Nothing. "You're tired," I whispered. "That's all this is." I took another few steps, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Still, I listened too hard. Every small sound felt amplified. The soft pull of my shoes leaving mud. The faint clink of my jacket zipper. I thought about turning around. The road back was well lit. Boring. Safe. But then another thought crept in, colder than the first. If someone came in behind me after I turned back, I wouldn't see them. Standing still felt worse than moving, so I kept going. The worst section came next. To my right, the factory fence ran straight and tall, metal panels bolted together, topped with barbed wire that caught faint reflections from distant lights. To my left, the woods began abruptly, no gradual edge, just darkness swallowing everything beyond the first few trunks. I kept my right hand on the fence to steady myself. The mud was thick here, water pooling in shallow stretches that reflected nothing at all. I tried not to look into the trees. Every time I did, my chest tightened for no logical reason. "Almost through," I muttered. That's when my foot caught. Something solid, probably a buried root or scrap metal, stopped me dead. I went forward hard, landing on my hands and knees. Cold mud soaked through my jeans instantly. "Shit," I hissed, breath knocked out of me. I stayed there for a second longer than I should have, palms stinging, heart racing. Then I heard it. Snap, snap, crunch. The sound didn't rush, it didn't scatter. It moved with weight. I turned fast, half expecting nothing. He was already there, stepping out of the trees like he'd been standing just out of sight the whole time. He was tall, taller than me by a head at least. Broad shoulders under a dark jacket. Long hair hung forward, hiding his face completely. He paused for a moment, turned his head slightly like he was checking behind himself, then faced me fully. He didn't say anything, didn't shift his weight, didn't rush, just stood there, about 15 feet away. My body locked up. Every warning signal went off at once. I tried to speak, to sound normal, casual, like this was just an awkward misunderstanding. "Hey, you all right, man?" What came out wasn't words, just a broken noise, thin and useless. He took one step toward me, slow, deliberate, not aggressive, certain. That was it. I turned and ran. I didn't think about direction. I didn't think about slipping. I just ran. Mud splashed up my legs, my lungs burned almost instantly. I could hear him behind me, not sprinting, not shouting, just heavy footsteps hitting the ground with steady rhythm. I imagined his hand grabbing my jacket. I imagined tripping again. "Don't fall," I gasped. "Don't fall." The path widened suddenly, ground firming beneath my feet. I burst out of the flats and into the park, legs screaming, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I didn't hear him anymore. I didn't slow down. I ran uphill, past dark houses, porch lights flicking on one by one as I tore through the estate like something was chasing me, which, for all I knew, still was. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice outside my door. Come on," I whispered, voice breaking. The lock finally turned. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, then leaned against it, gasping for air. I stayed there for a long time. I didn't look out the window. I didn't check the street. Eventually, my breathing slowed. My legs stopped shaking. I never saw him again. I don't know how long he followed me. I don't know how close he got. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't try to figure it out. Because whatever he was doing out there that night, whatever reason he had, it wasn't something I needed answers for. Some nights getting home is enough. I remember that winter like it's burned into me, the way certain smells or sounds stick with you long after you've grown up. I was still in school back then, still living at home, still measuring time in semesters and paydays instead of years. Winter break had just started, the kind where the days blur together and you lose track of what day of the week it is. It was the day after Christmas, December 26th, and the world felt half asleep. I had a part-time job at a pizza place in our town called Red Hollow Pizza, a squat little brick building wedged between a hardware store and an old insurance office. If you grew up where I did, you either worked there, dated someone who worked there, or knew someone who quit after 2 weeks because they couldn't handle the rush. It felt like every kid from my school rotated through that place at some point, bussing tables, answering phones, tossing dough, or like me, greeting customers and taking deliveries when they were short-staffed. I was young enough that every paycheck felt massive. I didn't have real bills yet, no rent, no car payment, nothing that made money feel heavy. So whenever my manager asked if I could pick up a shift, I always said yes. Didn't matter if it was a holiday, didn't matter if it cut into my break. In my head, I was stacking cash. That afternoon, I almost didn't go in. I remember standing in my room, pulling on my hoodie thinking, no way it's busy today. Everyone would still be home with family. Leftovers, movies, people in pajamas. I figured it'd be dead, maybe a few carryouts, nothing crazy. I couldn't have been more wrong. By the time dinner rolled around, the place was slammed. Every booth was full. People stood shoulder to shoulder near the counter, waiting on takeout orders. The phone never stopped ringing. The ovens blasted heat non-stop, and the whole place smelled like grease, melted cheese, and wet coats. "Hey!" my manager yelled over the noise, waving me over. His name was Rick, mid-30s, always tired, always chewing gum like his life depended on it. "You good to take deliveries?" "Yeah," I said, already grabbing my jacket. "Cool. Start with this one," he said, slapping a receipt onto a pizza box. "It's a bit of a drive." I didn't even look at the address yet. I just nodded, tucked the box under my arm, and headed out into the cold. The first delivery was quick. Easy house, lights on. Someone waiting at the door with cash in hand. I was back in my car within minutes, fingers already stiff from the cold. When I pulled back into the lot, Rick was there again. "Got another one for you," he said. "Single pizza." I glanced at the ticket this time. The address was unfamiliar, somewhere outside the main part of town. "How far?" I asked. He shrugged. "Like 20 minutes, maybe a bit more." I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. 20 minutes meant extra mileage, extra cash. Outside, the world felt completely different than it had inside the shop. The noise vanished the second the door closed behind me. The roads were dead. Not empty in a peaceful way. Empty in a way that made you feel like you were the only person awake. Snow drifted down lightly, only really visible when I passed under streetlights. It wasn't sticking much yet, just dusting the ground and softening everything. I drove slow, actually obeying the speed limit for once, letting myself enjoy the quiet. There was something almost calming about it, knowing the chaos of the shop was far behind me, at least for a little while. The further I drove, the fewer houses I saw. Streetlights thinned out. Trees closed in on both sides of the road. When my GPS finally told me I was close, I realized the house wasn't in a neighborhood at all. It sat alone, just off the road, with a long gravel driveway stretching back into the trees. The place looked festive, almost aggressively so. Christmas decorations covered the yard. Inflatable snowmen, plastic reindeer, strings of lights wrapped around trees and railings. The house itself was outlined in bright white bulbs, glowing against the dark woods behind it. It looked like someone had gone all out, but the driveway hadn't been plowed. Snow covered it completely, uneven and rutted, and I had that immediate sinking feeling that if I drove too far up, I'd get stuck. I eased in just enough to be off the road, parked at a slight angle, and shut the car off. As soon as I stepped out, the cold hit harder than I expected, the kind that cuts through your clothes and makes your lungs sting. I grabbed the pizza and started toward the house. That's when I noticed the lights. Every single outdoor decoration was on. Bright, cheerful, impossible to miss. But the house itself was dark. No warm glow from windows. No silhouettes moving behind curtains. Nothing. I slowed down, scanning the front of the house. As I got closer, I saw footprints in the snow leading up toward the porch. Fresh ones, deep enough to tell they hadn't been there long. All right, I muttered to myself. They're home. But when I reached the porch, I stopped. The footprints didn't go to the front door. They curved off to the side, disappearing around the corner of the porch. I stood there for a second, staring at them, a weird prickle crawling up my spine. Not my business, I said quietly, more to convince myself than anything else. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I waited, shifting my weight from foot to foot, breath fogging in front of my face. After about 30 seconds, I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The quiet out there felt thick. No TV sounds, no voices, just wind moving through trees and the soft hiss of falling snow. I checked the receipt again. Payment due on delivery. Come on, I said under my breath, and knocked a third time. Nothing. My fingers were starting to go numb, and irritation crept in. The footprints were fresh. Someone had to be there. I knocked again, hard enough that it echoed through the door. Still no answer. By the fifth knock, frustration had fully replaced patience. Seriously? I said out loud. I've been out here 5 minutes. I waited another few seconds, then finally gave up and turned back toward my car. The cold felt worse now, like it was punishing me for standing still. I hurried, set the pizza in the passenger seat and climbed in. I turned the key. The engine sputtered. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. Come on, I muttered, twisting the key harder this time. The engine caught for half a second, then died. My stomach dropped. No, 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 I said, trying again. Same thing. A weak sputter, then silence. I slapped the steering wheel in frustration, breath coming faster now, not just from the cold. I glanced up. That's when I saw him. A figure stood near the edge of the yard, close to where the porch wrapped around the side of the house. He was bundled head to toe, heavy boots, thick jacket, snow pants, a hood pulled low. I hadn't seen him come out. He was just there. I cracked my window and leaned out slightly. Hey, I called. Did you order the pizza? He didn't answer. Instead, he started walking toward my car. Not fast, not slow, measured, controlled. Something about the way he moved made my skin crawl. I've been knocking on your door, I said louder now, for like 5 minutes. Still no response. He kept coming. That's when it hit me, really hit me, that something was wrong. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hand suddenly clumsy. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned the key again, over and over, the engine refusing to cooperate. The man didn't change his pace. It felt like he knew I wasn't going anywhere. Panic flooded in fast and ugly. My fingers shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. It rang once before someone picked up. 911, what's your emergency? My car won't start, I blurted out, voice already cracking. I'm delivering pizza. I'm at this house and there's a guy outside. He's coming toward my car. Okay, the dispatcher said calmly. What's your location? I rattled off the address, stumbling over the words. As I spoke, the man reached my window. That's when he finally talked. You need help? He asked. His voice was low, deep, too calm. My blood went cold. How would he know that? I pressed the phone harder to my ear. He's right here, I whispered. He's at my window. Sir, the dispatcher said, stay in the vehicle. Officers are on the way. Outside, the man shifted his weight, peering into my car. His eyes were hard to see under the hood, but I could feel them on me. You look cold, he said. Car trouble? I didn't answer. His tone changed slightly, impatience creeping in. He glanced around, then tried the door handle. Locked. His jaw tightened. I kept trying the ignition, whispering prayers I didn't even believe in anymore. Then he reached into his pockets. One, then the other. His movements became frantic. No, he muttered, barely audible through the glass. Then he punched the window. Once, twice. The sound was sharp and violent, and I screamed despite myself. The glass didn't break, but it shook hard enough that I thought it might. He backed up, breathing heavy now, eyes wild. Then he turned and ran back toward the side of the house. I sat there frozen, phone still pressed to my ear. Stay with me, the dispatcher said. Can you see him? He ran around the house, I said, voice shaking. I think he's getting something. 2 minutes felt like an hour. I stared at the trees, the driveway, every shadow. My mind raced. Do I stay? Do I run? If I ran, where would I go? The woods were dark, deep snow, no lights. Then I saw it. Red and blue lights flashing faintly in my rearview mirror. Relief hit me so hard I started crying. At the same moment, the man reappeared from the side of the house. Something was in his right hand. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but I didn't need to. He saw the lights too. For a split second, our eyes met. Then he took off, disappearing into the trees like he'd never been there at all. The police arrived seconds later. 2 cruisers, lights cutting through the dark. Officers got out, hands on their weapons, scanning the area. They searched the property, the woods, the driveway. No one found him. That's when the truth came out. The house was empty. The owners were out of town for the holidays. The decorations were plugged into an exterior outlet, set on a timer. The footprints weren't theirs. An officer checked under my hood and found something had been tampered with. He didn't go into details, just shook his head and said, "You're lucky." I never took another delivery after that night. Every December since, when the snow starts falling and the streets go quiet, I think about that driveway, that house, that man, and how close I came to never driving home at all. I was 21 that December, and nothing in my life felt like it lined up anymore. Not in a dramatic movie-ending way, just quietly wrong. Like I'd missed a turn years ago and kept driving anyway because stopping felt worse than being lost. I lived in a second-floor apartment in a place called West Alder Ridge, a patch of Southern California that sat just far enough from the beach to lose the charm, but close enough to keep the rent criminal. The complex was a maze of beige buildings, identical balconies, and parking spots that never seemed to belong to the people who needed them. December didn't bring snow there. It brought colder nights, longer shadows, and this strange stillness that made everything feel unfinished. That year I was working 2 jobs, morning shifts at a warehouse that smelled like cardboard and spilled energy drinks, night shifts at a takeout spot wedged between a vape shop and a nail salon. I was always tired, always broke, always telling myself it was temporary. It never felt temporary anymore. My roommates had stopped pretending we were friends. We shared space, not conversations. One night, while we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, Miles cleared his throat. "Me and Theo are moving," he said. I muted the TV. When? End of the month. To where? Brooklyn or Queens, somewhere like that. Theo shrugged. Cousins got room. They said it casually, like it didn't mean my rent was about to double, like it didn't mean the last thing tethering me to that place was gone. I didn't argue. I didn't ask them to stay. I already knew I wasn't going to. My mom had left 2 months earlier, packed everything into a rented truck and headed to Silver Mesa, Nevada. She called it a fresh start. Cheaper rent, less noise. She told me I should come too. I didn't want to be that close to nothing. The only real option I had was my Uncle Rourke. He lived outside Briar Hollow, Colorado. Mountains, snow, quiet. You can stay as long as you need, he said on the phone. No pressure. Just don't freeze to death. It sounded like relief. The only thing standing between me and leaving was my car. That car had been dying for a long time. It was a dull silver sedan with faded paint and a driver's seat that leaned permanently to the left. The check engine light never turned off. I stopped noticing it years ago. Back in July, it overheated on the freeway. Steam pouring from the hood. Coolant everywhere. I got it towed to a mechanic who didn't bother sugarcoating it. Head gasket's blown, he said. You'd be better off setting it on fire. I laughed like he was joking. He wasn't. I didn't have the money to fix it. So I did what broke people do. I ignored it. I drove slower. I kept water in the trunk. I turned the heater on when it started overheating, even in summer. Every drive felt like borrowing time. By December, it barely started. I knew it wouldn't survive a trip through the mountains. Hell, I wasn't sure it would survive another week. So one night after getting home late, I sat on my bed and posted a listing. Car for sale. Doesn't run well. Engine issues. Good for parts. Best offer. I stared at it for a while before hitting post. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I buy dead cars, can come tonight. I hesitated. It was already dark, cold, quiet, but I needed it gone. We agreed to meet in the apartment parking lot. By the time he showed up, the sun had disappeared completely. The air had that sharp bite that only comes once the light's gone. I zipped my jacket and stepped outside. An SUV pulled in, dark-colored, engine running. The headlights stayed on. A man stepped out. Mid-30s maybe. Stocky. Heavy jacket zipped up to his neck. "Hello," he said. Thick accent. Not hostile. Just flat. "Hey," I replied. "You the seller?" "Yeah." We walked toward my car. I could already feel embarrassment creeping in. The dents, the cracked side mirror, the faint smell of oil. I got in and turned the key. The engine coughed, shook, rattled like it was arguing with itself. Then it shut off. I let go of the key. "That's about how it goes," I said. He sighed quietly. "You say engine problem," he said. "Head gasket." He circled the car slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning everything. "You ask 400, he said. "That's what I listed." He stopped, looked at me. 150. I let out a short laugh. "That's low." He shrugged. "Scrap." I thought about the bus ticket I'd probably end up buying, thought about the boxes in my room, thought about how much I just needed this over. "Fine," I said. 150. His mouth twitched into a smile. "Good." He went back to his SUV and pulled out paperwork. "You cold?" he asked. "Sit inside." "I'm all right," I said. He looked at me again. "It is cold." "I'm fine." He opened the passenger door anyway. "Sit. Warm." Something about the way he insisted made my stomach tighten. "I'll stand," I said. He reached out slightly, not touching me but close enough. "Just sit." I didn't want trouble, didn't want attention, so I perched on the edge of the seat, one foot still outside, door open. The inside smelled like cheap air freshener layered over something stale. He watched me while he wrote, too closely. Then he got into the driver's seat. I stepped out immediately. He paused. "No cash," he said. "A TM." My heart skipped. You said you had it. I go now. You come. No, I said quickly. Faster. I'll wait. He tilted his head. Why? Car's here. You think I don't return? I forced a smile. Got dinner going. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. I return? He drove off. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to the quiet parking lot, feeling something cold settle in my chest. I didn't know exactly what had almost happened, but I knew enough to be glad I didn't get in that SUV. The parking lot went quiet after he left. Not dramatic quiet. Just the normal kind that settles in when engines stop and people go back inside. A couple porch lights buzzed. Somewhere, a TV laughed through a cracked window. Everything looked the same as it had an hour earlier, but it didn't feel the same. I stood next to my car longer than necessary, keys clenched in my hand, trying to convince myself I wasn't overreacting, that this was just another uncomfortable interaction with a stranger, that nothing bad had actually happened. Still, I didn't go back inside right away. I walked the long way around the complex, past the laundry room, past the dumpster enclosure, like I needed proof that the world was still moving normally. My breath came out in thin white clouds. My fingers ached from the cold. When I finally went upstairs, I locked my door and flipped the deadbolt twice. I hadn't done that in months. I didn't sit down, I didn't turn on the TV. Instead, I grabbed my phone and stepped onto the balcony that overlooked the entrance to the lot. From there, I could see headlights the second any car turned in. That was when my hands started shaking. Not violently, just enough that I noticed. I leaned against the railing, phone in one hand, the other shoved into my jacket pocket, and waited. My mind kept replaying the moment he told me to sit inside the SUV. The way he didn't ask, really. The way he acted like it was already decided. I tried to imagine myself saying yes, tried to picture how it would have gone, and every version ended the same way, with me realizing too late that I'd made a mistake. About 15 minutes later, headlights appeared at the entrance. Same SUV. I didn't feel relief. I felt alert. I watched him park, watched him get out, watched him look around the lot once before spotting my car. I waited until he was standing beside it before going downstairs. This time I kept my distance, stayed near the stairwell. Didn't let him close the space between us. Here, he said, holding out the money. It was exactly $150. 100, 150, crisp, flat. Not the messy stack of 20s you get from an ATM. I took it anyway. We finished the paperwork without talking much. His pen scratched loudly against the paper. He tore off a copy and handed it to me. All good, he said. Yeah, I replied. He got back into the SUV, started the engine, and drove away without another glance. I stood there until the sound faded. Only then did I let myself breathe. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time headlights passed on the street outside, I woke up. My body stayed tense, like it hadn't gotten the message that the danger, whatever it was, had passed. The next morning, I called my uncle and told him I was coming sooner than planned. Good, he said. Snow's supposed to hit tomorrow. Roads will be quiet. I packed what I could fit into 2 duffel bags and a backpack. Left the furniture, left the junk. Left the version of myself that thought staying was easier than starting over. I took a bus out of the city. As it pulled away, I watched the buildings thin out, watched palm trees give way to open stretches of brown hills. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. Colorado was cold in a way Southern California never was. The air felt heavier, cleaner. The snow made everything quieter, like the world had its volume turned down. My uncle's place sat at the edge of town, surrounded by trees and empty land. At night, the darkness there felt deep, but honest. Not crowded, not threatening. It took weeks for the tension to leave my body. Sometimes, when I was lying in bed, I'd still think about that SUV, about the way he insisted, about how close I came to stepping fully inside. Nothing dramatic happened afterward. No police report, no follow-up, no confirmation of what he intended. And that's the part that stuck with me. Because most danger doesn't announce itself. It shows up quiet, polite, almost reasonable. It asks instead of forces. Looking back, I don't think I was brave that night. I don't think I did anything heroic. I think I just listened, for once, to that small, steady voice that said something wasn't right, even if I couldn't explain why. I still have the paperwork in a box somewhere, the proof that I sold that car, the proof that I walked away. Every now and then, when December rolls around and the nights get long again, I think about how easily that story could have ended differently, and how grateful I am that it didn't. I've lived in Red Hollow Township most of my adult life, mostly because nothing ever happens here. People hear the name and imagine something eerie, but it's just a quiet patch of rural Midwest tucked between long county roads and miles of empty land. No sidewalks, no streetlights past a certain point, just houses spread far enough apart that you don't hear your neighbors unless they're running a chainsaw or firing up a snowblower. I moved into my place almost 8 years ago after my divorce. It wasn't big, but it was solid. One story, unfinished basement, wide backyard that melted straight into open land. The previous owner had died there, heart attack, natural causes which didn't bother me. Around here, every house has history. You stop caring or you go crazy. December had always been my favorite month. Not for the holidays exactly, but for the quiet. Snow muffles everything. The world feels smaller, safer. That illusion matters more than people admit. That night started like any other winter evening. I had taken the day off work because the forecast was already warning about high winds and possible blizzard conditions moving in by nightfall. The kind of storm where the weather people use phrases like whiteout conditions and stay off the roads unless absolutely necessary. I remember waking up early, making coffee, and sitting by the fireplace longer than usual. The wood crackled in a way that felt almost intentional, like it knew I was paying attention. I spent the day doing small things, fixing a loose cabinet hinge, reorganizing the hallway closet, tossing out old mail that had piled up on the counter. Nothing important, just staying busy. The TV stayed on most of the day. News channel, low volume, more for company than information. Around 5 in the evening, the wind started hitting the house hard enough to rattle the windows. Not violently, just constant, like something pacing outside, never stopping long enough to rest. The meteorologist said, "If you don't need to be out tonight, don't be." I smiled to myself and muttered, "Wasn't planning on it." By 7, the snow had picked up so much that the backyard lights barely cut through it. I switched channels, landed on some rerun sitcom I wasn't really watching, and pulled a blanket over my legs on the couch. That was when I heard it. Not a sound exactly. More like a shift. The kind of thing you only notice because everything else is already so loud. I turned my head toward the back of the house. The wind was howling now, pushing snow sideways. I stood and walked to the sliding window that faced the yard. At first, all I could see was white. Snow rushing down at an angle that didn't look natural. Visibility was awful. Then something darker moved through it. I leaned closer to the glass. A figure. Someone was walking through my backyard. Not running, not stumbling, just walking, steady, calm, like it was a mild afternoon instead of a full-blown winter storm. My stomach tightened. The yard is big enough that someone passing through wouldn't be completely impossible. No fence, just open land that eventually leads to a narrow road almost a mile back, but no one walks out there, especially not during a storm like this. The figure moved from left to right, head slightly down, coat pulled tight. I couldn't see their face. The snow swallowed them before they reached the tree line. I stood there longer than I meant to, waiting for them to reappear. They didn't. I told myself it was probably someone whose car broke down, or a neighbor cutting across land they shouldn't be on. Still, something about the way they walked bothered me. No urgency, no hesitation, just direction. I went back to the couch, but the comfort was gone. Every sound felt sharper. The wind, the fire, even the refrigerator cycling on. 5 minutes later, someone knocked on my front door. I froze. The knock wasn't frantic. It wasn't weak either. 3 solid taps. Controlled. I didn't answer right away. Another knock followed. Same rhythm. I stood slowly and walked to the door, keeping my steps quiet. I cracked it open just enough to see outside, keeping the chain latched. A man stood on my porch. Heavy winter jacket, snow clinging to his shoulders. His nose was bright red, skin pale in that way people get when they've been cold too long. His breath came out in sharp clouds. "Hey," he said, forcing a small smile. "Sorry to bother you." His voice shook, not dramatically, but enough to sound real. I swallowed. "Yeah? I'm waiting on a ride," he said. "Phone died. They're supposed to be close, but, you know." He gestured vaguely at the storm. "Any chance I could warm up for a minute?" I hesitated. Up close, I couldn't tell if this was the same person I'd seen outside. Similar build, maybe. But memory gets unreliable when fear kicks in. "I don't really let people in," I said carefully. He nodded quickly. "I get it. Totally. I don't blame you. That should have made me feel better." It didn't. I glanced past him. The street was empty. No headlights. No movement. Just snow being driven sideways by the wind. "I can let you wait on the porch," I said. "There's an overhang. Keeps the snow off." His smile faded just a little. "Yeah," he said. "That's fine." I closed the door and locked it before he could say anything else. Through the window beside the door, I watched him move to the chair near the wall and sit down. I told myself I'd done the right thing. Still, guilt crept in. It was cold. Dangerous cold. I went upstairs and dug through the closet until I found an old jacket I hadn't worn in years. Too big, torn at the cuff, but warm. I headed back down, jacket in hand, fingers already on the deadbolt. That was when something made me stop. I can't explain it properly. No sound. No movement. Just a pressure in my chest that said, "Don't." I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. The man was no longer sitting. He was standing directly in front of the door, close enough that I could see one eye through the warped glass. His hand rested on the handle, not knocking, not waiting, just holding it, like he was ready. My heart slammed so hard I thought he might hear it. I stepped back slowly, my breath shallow. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and dialed 911, whispering as soon as the operator answered. "There's a man on my porch," I said. "I think he's trying to get inside." She asked questions. Address, description. Told me officers were on their way. While she spoke, I watched the door. It didn't move. When she told me to stay inside and remain quiet, I nodded even though she couldn't see me. After a minute, I crept back to the peephole. The porch was empty. No man. No footprints visible through the blowing snow. Nothing. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the area. Found nothing. Told me I probably did the right thing. I didn't sleep that night. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I'd opened the door. And sometimes, on stormy nights, I swear I hear 3 steady knocks carried by the wind. I remember December always feeling heavier than the rest of the year. Like the cold didn't just settle into the air but into people too. The kind of month where everything slows down, streets go quiet earlier, and even familiar places feel a little off once the sun disappears. Back then, I was 25, living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment wedged above a dry cleaner on the east side of the city. It wasn't fancy thin walls, radiator that clanked like it was alive, but it was mine. Rent was cheap enough, and the bus line ran close. Though most nights I drove because my job sat way out past the city limits in one of those office parks, surrounded by nothing but trees and half-plowed roads. I worked as an operations coordinator for a logistics company. It sounds more impressive than it was. Mostly spreadsheets, emails, and staying late when shipments got delayed. My schedule was never consistent. Some weeks I clocked out at 4 in the afternoon. Others I was locking the office doors close to midnight. That unpredictability had slowly pulled me away from friends. They stopped inviting me out because I was always working late again. By December, most nights ended with me microwaving leftovers and falling asleep to the sound of traffic outside my window. That night was a Thursday, a couple weeks before Christmas. I remember because someone had taped a crooked paper snowflake to the break room fridge, and it kept falling off every time the door shut. Around 10:30, the office emptied out one by one. Chairs rolled back. Good nights echoed down the hallway. By 11, it was just me, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the low whir of the ancient heating system. I checked the time on my phone and sighed. Of course. I muttered to no one. Outside, snow had been falling steadily for hours. Not a blizzard, just enough to coat everything in that deceptively calm white layer that makes roads slick and hides ice underneath. I shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and did my usual end-of-night routine: locked the file cabinets, shut off the lights room by room, then pulled the front door closed behind me and turned the key. The cold hit my face immediately. Sharp, clean, the kind that makes your lungs ache when you breathe in too fast. The parking lot lights cast pale yellow halos onto the snow, and my car sat alone at the far end, already half buried. I brushed off the windshield with numb hands, climbed inside, and cranked the heater as high as it would go. "Come on," I whispered, watching my breath fog up the glass as the engine struggled awake. The drive home usually took about 40 minutes on a good night. That night, I knew it would be longer. The roads out there didn't get priority when it came to plowing. Once I hit the back highways, it was just me, the snow, and long stretches of darkness broken by the occasional reflective sign. At first, everything was fine. I drove slow, hands tight on the steering wheel, radio low. A couple times the tires slipped just a little, enough to spike my heart before the car corrected itself. "Easy," I told myself. "You're fine. Just take it slow." About 20 minutes in, it happened again, only this time the car didn't straighten out. The back end slid, then kept sliding. I tried to steer into it like you're supposed to, but the tires had no grip. Everything felt oddly quiet, almost slow motion, as the car drifted sideways and gently slid into a snowbank along the shoulder. There was no crash, no loud bang, just the soft crunch of packed snow and a final lurch as the car tilted downward into a shallow ditch. I sat there for a second, heart pounding, hands still locked around the wheel. "Seriously?" I breathed. I tried reversing. The tires spun uselessly. I tried rocking it forward. Nothing. The car was stuck, angled just enough that gravity was working against me. Snow had piled up almost to the bottom of the doors. I pulled my hat back on, zipped my coat, and stepped outside. The cold bit immediately. I looked around. No houses, no streetlights. Just trees lining the road and falling snow muting every sound. I bent down, tried shoveling snow away with my hands. It was pointless. Defeated, I leaned against the car and covered my face. "This is perfect," I said out loud, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. Just perfect. I knew I needed to call roadside assistance. I also knew it could take hours. My phone was already at 30%. I pulled it out, hesitating. That's when headlights appeared in the distance. They slowed as they approached, then stopped beside me. A silver pickup truck. The window rolled down, and a man leaned out. "You need a hand?" he called over the wind. He looked normal. Middle-aged, maybe. Baseball cap, work jacket. Not rushed, not aggressive. "I slid off," I said. "I can't get out." "I've got a tow strap," he said. "I can pull you out real quick." Relief washed over me so fast it almost hurt. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "That would be amazing. Thank you." He glanced toward the back of his truck, then frowned slightly. "Actually," he said, "my hitch is back at my place, just up the road. 5 minutes, tops. I'll be right back." Before I could overthink it, he rolled the window up and drove off. As soon as his taillights disappeared, doubt crept in. Why didn't he already have it? What if he doesn't come back? What if? I got back in my car, shut the door, and locked it. The heater was still struggling, barely taking the edge off the cold. The snow kept falling. Every minute felt longer than the last. "Maybe I should just call," I whispered, thumb hovering over my phone screen. That's when something knocked on my window. I jumped so hard my phone slipped from my hand. A man stood outside, inches from the glass. He wore 2 thick jackets and a scarf pulled high over his face. Only his eyes and part of his nose were visible. His skin looked unnaturally pale. I cracked the window just enough to speak. "I'm okay," I said quickly. "Someone's already coming to help." He didn't respond. He just stared. I said, "I've got help," I repeated, forcing calm into my voice. Still nothing. Then I heard a click. It took a second to register. The sound of the handle. The door unlocking. "No," I started. His arm shot through the gap, fingers moving fast, flipping the lock. He yanked the door open before I could react. I screamed. I kicked. I clawed. But he was stronger. He grabbed my arms, dragging me across the seat, out into the snow. My boots slipped, my head spun, and suddenly we were off the road, his grip like iron as he hauled me toward the trees. "Let go," I sobbed. "Please." Then, headlights flooded the world. A truck roared to a stop. "Hey!" a man shouted. "Get away from her!" The grip vanished. The attacker bolted, disappearing into the woods like he'd never been there at all. I collapsed, shaking, barely able to stand. A coat wrapped around my shoulders. "You're okay," a voice said. "You're okay. I've got you." It was the man from the silver truck. The rest of the night blurred together police lights, questions, statements, the sound of my own voice shaking as I tried to explain. I made it home just before dawn. Even now, every December, when the snow falls just right and the roads go quiet, I think about how close I came to never making it home at all. I remember December more by the quiet than the cold. I'd moved to Briar Hollow, a small unincorporated town tucked between two highways and a stretch of protected woodland, about 3 years before this happened. The kind of place where Google Maps still gets confused. Where delivery drivers call you asking if your house is the one past the rusted mailbox or the one with the leaning pine. It wasn't charming in a postcard way. It was just empty, affordable, quiet enough for someone like me. I worked remote long before it became normal. Data compliance for a mid-sized insurance firm based out of Ohio. Not exciting, but steady. Most days I barely spoke to another human outside of Zoom calls and the cashier at the grocery store. That suited me fine. After a rough breakup and a messy apartment lease back in the city, I wanted space. Real space, trees, snow that stuck around longer than a day. That's why I adopted Luma. She was a mixed breed rescue, part shepherd, part something heavier with one ear that never quite stood upright. Nervous around strangers, glued to my side otherwise. The shelter warned me she'd probably always be alert. At the time, I thought that meant she'd bark at the mailman. I didn't know how much that alertness would end up meaning. December that year was brutal. Not picturesque snow globe stuff. It snowed almost every day. The kind that doesn't fall softly, but gets thrown sideways by the wind. Drifts piled up along the road like frozen waves. Power flickered more than once. By mid-month, everyone in Briar Hollow had stopped pretending winter was anything but survival. That Thursday started like every other one. "I'll circle back after lunch," my supervisor said through a screen full of frozen faces. Her voice crackled, robotic. My internet had been acting up all week. Weather, old lines, who knows. "Sounds good," I said, though I wasn't sure she heard me. By late afternoon, the connection was barely holding. Audio dropped, video froze. At one point, I was pretty sure I spent a full minute nodding at a screen that hadn't updated since 4:12 p.m. At 6:03, everything cut out completely. No warning, no spinning wheel, just silence. I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor for a second, then leaned back in my chair. Outside, the wind howled hard enough to make the windows hum. "Well," I muttered, rubbing my eyes. "Guess that's that." Luma lifted her head from her bed near the desk, tail thumping once. "You want to go out real quick?" I asked her. Just real quick. She didn't love the cold, but she followed me anyway, nails clicking on the hardwood. I pulled on boots, a thick jacket, a knit cap that smelled faintly like wood smoke from last winter. The moment I opened the door, the cold hit like a slap. It was already dark, the sky low and heavy. Snow blew across the yard in sharp bursts, stinging my cheeks. Luma stepped out cautiously, nose low, ears twitching. "Go on," I urged, shivering. Hurry up. She moved toward the side yard, where the fence line blurred into shadows. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, breath fogging thick in front of me. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought it was a mailbox or a signpost I hadn't seen before. Something dark against the white. But then it shifted, just slightly. A person stood near the edge of the road, not walking, not waving, just standing there, facing. I wasn't sure. Me? The house? The trees behind it? I squinted, heart giving a small, uneasy kick. Who the hell would be out here in this? Briar Hollow didn't have sidewalks, no bus stops, no late-night foot traffic, especially not during a wind advisory and active snowfall. Luma finished quickly and trotted back, tail tucked. Okay, I said, already backing toward the door. I didn't look at the road again. I didn't want to give whatever or whoever that was any more of my attention. Inside, warmth rushed back around me. I locked the door out of habit, then wiped Luma's paws dry with the towel by the entryway. Crazy weather, I murmured, mostly to myself. I turned on the TV, volume low, letting the local news fill the quiet. Warnings about icy roads, a segment on a stalled snowplow. Nothing urgent. I curled up on the couch with a blanket. Luma pressed against my leg. 10 minutes passed, maybe less. Luma's body went stiff. She lifted her head slowly, ears forward, a low sound rumbling in her chest. "What is it?" I whispered. She stood, hackles raised, eyes locked on the front door. Then she growled. Not the playful kind. Not the warning bark she gave deer or raccoons. This was deep, serious. My stomach dropped. I muted the TV and listened. At first, all I heard was the wind. Then soft, deliberate crunching. Footsteps, not approaching the door, pacing. I stood slowly and walked to the window beside the door, careful not to make noise. The curtains were closed, but I could see movement underneath, shadows shifting. I crouched and lifted the fabric just enough to peek out. Boot prints cut across the fresh snow on my patio. Back and forth, overlapping. Whoever it was had been there longer than a few seconds. I watched as a figure moved past the window, close enough that I could see the dark outline of a jacket sleeve. My throat went dry. The person stopped near the corner of the house, just out of sight. I let the curtain fall and backed away, pulse pounding in my ears. "What the hell?" I breathed. Luma stopped growling after a moment, but she didn't relax. She stayed standing, eyes fixed on the door like she was waiting for it to move. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing. Eventually, the footsteps faded. No door handle rattled, no knock. Just gone. I debated calling the police. Picked up my phone. Set it down again. What would I even say? Some guy walked around my porch in a snowstorm? I hated how small that sounded. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Too quietly. I checked the locks twice, then a third time. Took Luma out again around 10, scanning the road before stepping off the porch. Nothing. Just wind and snow and the crunch of my own boots. By the time I climbed into bed, exhaustion pulled at me hard. I turned off the lamp. That's when I saw Luma standing in the doorway. She hadn't jumped onto the bed like she always did. She just stood there, body rigid, tail low, staring past me into the hallway. "Luma," I whispered. "Come here, girl." She didn't move. My heart began to race. I sat up slowly. "What's wrong?" She let out a soft whine, eyes never leaving the dark beyond the doorframe. Every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong. I slid out of bed, moving as quietly as I could, and stepped toward the door. Luma backed up a half step, still watching the hallway. I leaned forward and pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. Just the faint hum of the heater downstairs. I reached for the knob. Before my fingers could close around it, the handle twisted from the other side. Slow, careful, testing. I froze. The handle moved again. Harder this time. Someone was in my house. I stumbled back, heart slamming so hard I thought it might give me away. Luma let out a sharp bark, then another. The handle rattled, jerked. Whoever it was knew exactly where I was. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "There's someone in my house," I whispered as soon as the operator answered. "They're outside my bedroom door." The rattling stopped. Silence. I scanned the room, desperate, and my eyes landed on the iron in the closet. I grabbed it, clutching it like it could actually save me. "I'm upstairs," I told the operator. "Please hurry." It felt like hours before the sirens finally cut through the wind. Police searched the house, found the front door open. No signs of forced entry, just boot prints, snowy, melting, tracking through the hallway. They said it looked like he wasn't there to steal. He was there for me. They never found him. I didn't sleep much after that. But Luma did, right beside me, every night since. I didn't plan on working that night. December nights have a way of convincing you to stay inside, especially when the snow starts coming down sideways and the weather app keeps lighting up with warnings. But winter break had already been ticking away faster than I liked, and I knew from experience that if I skipped too many nights, I'd feel it hard once classes started again. So I pulled on my boots, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. I'd been doing Uber Eats every winter break for the past couple of years. College let out for a full month, and this was the easiest way to make money without interviews, schedules, or explaining gaps on a resume. I didn't work during the semester, so winter was when I stacked whatever cash I could to survive the rest of the year. No boss, no coworkers, just me, a phone, and a car. That year, my car wasn't an option. The brakes were shot, and my dad didn't trust it in snow anyway. So I borrowed his pickup, an older Ford with a bench seat and a heater that worked only when it felt like it. He tossed me the keys and said, "Take it slow. Roads are going to be trashed tonight." "I know," I said. "I'll be careful." It was already snowing when I pulled out of the driveway. Thick flakes, the kind that don't drift gently but come straight at your windshield like they're angry at you. Within 10 minutes, the roads were coated. Not terrible yet, but enough to demand attention. What surprised me was how busy it was. Order after order came in, big ones too. The snow must have scared off other drivers, because I barely had time to park before the app chimed again. Good payouts, solid tips, the kind of night you don't argue with. For about 3 hours, everything went smooth. I stayed near the main roads, hitting fast food spots and chain restaurants, dropping orders at apartments and normal houses with porch lights glowing warm against the snow. People waved from windows. A couple shouted thanks through cracked doors. It was cold, but familiar, almost relaxing in a strange way. By around 10:45 p.m. though, I felt it creeping in, the exhaustion. The kind that settles behind your eyes and makes your reactions a half-second slower than they should be. "That's it," I muttered to myself after finishing a drop. "One more if it's worth it. Then I'm done." Like it heard me, the app buzzed. Drive-through pickup, 20-minute drive, big payout. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. "All right," I sighed. Last one. The restaurant was quiet, almost eerie for a drive-through. No line, no other cars. The employee handed me the bag and said, "Stay safe out there," in that tone people use when they genuinely mean it. "Yeah," I said. "You too." I pulled away and followed the GPS. The route took me farther out than I expected, past the busier parts of town, past shopping centers and streetlights, into an area where the roads narrowed and the houses spread out. Big properties, long driveways, old money vibes without the shine. I'd been around that side of the county before, but not deep into the neighborhoods. The snow got worse the farther I went. The plows hadn't touched these roads yet, and tire tracks were already filling back in. By the time the clock hit 11 p.m., snow had piled up enough that I had both hands tight on the wheel. "Almost there," I said out loud, more for my own reassurance than anything. The neighborhood finally appeared, massive houses set way back from the road, each one sitting on acres of land, no fences, just long, winding driveways disappearing into darkness. The houses themselves were huge, but old. Stone and brick, tall roofs, narrow windows. They didn't look abandoned, just quiet. Too quiet. I slowed as the GPS counted down the distance. There, I said, spotting the address marker barely visible under snow. The driveway was completely covered. At least a foot of snow. Untouched. No tire tracks. No sign anyone had been in or out recently. Nope, I muttered. I parked on the road, hazard lights blinking softly against the white. I grabbed the food, shoved my phone into my pocket, and stepped out. The cold hit hard. Snow immediately soaked into my jeans as I trudged up the driveway, my boots crunching loudly with every step. The house loomed bigger the closer I got. No lights in the windows, not even a porch light. As I reached the steps, I noticed a piece of paper taped to the front door. That stopped me. I stepped closer, lifting my phone flashlight. At the top of the page, in big red letters, it read, "Notice." Below that, smaller text mentioned the county. Something official. I started to read. Crunch. I froze. Another crunch. Slow, heavy. Footsteps in the snow behind me. I turned. A man was coming toward me from around the side of the house, near what I assumed was the garage. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a short buzz cut and a jacket that looked worn and dirty, like it hadn't been washed in a while. My heart kicked up immediately. "Oh hey," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Just dropping off your order." He didn't respond. He kept walking, each step deliberate, calm. Something about that set my nerves on fire. I held the bag up slightly. Uber Eats. He stopped a few feet away and looked at me. His eyes were wrong. Not angry. Not excited. Just empty. Tired in a way that felt heavy, like he'd been carrying something for too long. He held his hand out. I stepped forward and gave him the bag. He didn't take it. His hand stayed out. He didn't move. Seconds stretched. Snow landed on his shoulders, melting into dark spots on the fabric. "All right," I said carefully, stepping to the side. "Have a good night, sir." I started to walk past him, toward the driveway. That's when he moved. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his arm swing out toward me. I stumbled back instinctively, nearly losing my footing in the snow. "Hey," I said, my voice sharp now. He stepped toward me. "Come with me," he said. His voice was low, flat, like he was asking me to hand him a receipt. "No," I said immediately, backing up. "I'm leaving." "Stop," he said, reaching out again. "Just come with me." Every alarm in my body was screaming. I turned and ran. The snow made it hard. My boots sank with every step, legs burning as I forced myself forward. Behind me, I heard him moving faster now. "Stop running," he yelled. I didn't look back. I hit the road, slipped once, caught myself, and yanked open the truck door. I threw myself inside, slammed it shut, and locked it just as he reached the edge of the driveway. I threw the truck into reverse, tires spinning before catching, and backed out hard. Snow sprayed everywhere as I turned and hit the gas. As I drove off, my hands shaking on the wheel, I glanced in the mirror. He stood in the driveway, watching, not chasing, just watching. I didn't slow down until I was well out of the neighborhood. My chest hurt from breathing too fast. I pulled over on the side of the road and called the police. My voice cracked as I explained what happened. They took it seriously, asked for the address, sent a car. Later that night, an officer called me back. "The house you delivered to," he said, "isn't currently owned. It's been vacant for months." I swallowed. "The notice on the door was about foreclosure," he continued. "We didn't find anyone there when we arrived." I sat in silence, staring at the dashboard. "What he wanted," the officer said carefully. "We don't know." After that night, I stopped delivering once it got dark in the winter. Even now, whenever I pull up to a house with all the lights off, my stomach tightens. And sometimes, when it's snowing, I still think about that man standing in the driveway watching me leave like he knew he'd get another chance. I grew up believing December nights were supposed to be quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones once the heat kicks on and the wind starts scraping against the siding. The kind where the world feels paused, like everyone agreed to go to sleep at the same time. I used to like that quiet. Needed it, even. But that was before I learned how loud silence can be. Back then, my daughter was still small enough to sleep in a bassinet beside my bed. She was just over 6 months old, all soft breaths and warm milk breath and tiny sighs that made the long nights feel survivable. Her father, my husband at the time, worked overnights at a distribution plant off the highway. 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most nights, it was just me and her in that house. The house itself wasn't special. 2 stories, faded blue siding, creaky wooden stairs that always complained, no matter how quietly you tried to climb them. Built sometime in the 1940s, back when they didn't worry much about insulation or noise carrying through walls. It sat on a narrow road just outside town, the kind of road people only used if they lived there or got lost. Behind the house was a stretch of woods that ran farther than most people realized. Not thick forest, exactly just enough trees to feel like a boundary, enough to block sound, enough to hide things. That night was cold even for December, the kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp in your lungs. I remember checking the thermostat before bed and bumping it up a couple degrees, then feeling guilty like I always did. Money was tight back then. New baby, 1 income most weeks. Everything felt like a calculation. My daughter woke up around midnight, right on schedule. Her cry wasn't panicked, just that small, tired complaint babies make when they're hungry and half asleep. I rolled out of bed, warmed a bottle in the bathroom sink, and fed her in the dim glow of the nightlight. She wrapped her tiny fingers around my thumb while she drank, eyes closed, trusting me completely. I remember thinking how unfair it felt that something so small depended on me for everything. When she finished, I burped her gently, laid her back in the bassinet, and watched her chest rise and fall until her breathing evened out again. Only then did I crawl back into bed. Sleep didn't come right away. I grabbed my phone, mostly out of habit. Facebook was mindless enough to help my brain shut down. Scrolling, nothing important. Family photos, complaints about the cold, someone posting about their driveway not being plowed yet. Then I saw the first post. Anyone else hearing helicopters? Police everywhere by the river. I frowned and kept scrolling. Another one. Stay inside. Something serious going on. Lock your doors. That one made me pause. I tapped into the comments. Dozens of people chiming in, confused, speculating. Someone said there'd been a stabbing in the next town over. Someone else said shooting. Someone else said it was nothing and people were overreacting. Normally, I would have rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. Small towns love drama. But then someone posted a link. It wasn't Facebook gossip. It was a real local news site, real headline, real timestamp. Police search for suspect after fatal homicide. My stomach tightened. The article said a man had killed someone less than 10 minutes from where I lived, that he'd fled on foot, that police were asking residents to stay inside, lock doors, and remain alert for emergency notifications. I sat up in bed. This didn't happen here, ever. I texted my husband at work. Hey, are you hearing about this police thing? There was a murder nearby. A minute passed. Then, probably not as bad as FB says. But yeah, put a scanner on if you're worried. I downloaded a police scanner app and set my phone on the nightstand, volume low. At first, it was just static and the occasional calm voice calling out locations I half recognized. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up to chaos. The scanner was screaming. Multiple voices overlapping. Tense, sharp. Someone yelling coordinates. Someone else shouting. Shots fired. The sound was so sudden and loud that for a split second, I didn't know if it was coming from my phone or outside. Then I heard it. A crack. Then another. Real gunfire. Close enough that my chest vibrated. I froze, heart slamming so hard I felt dizzy. Another shot. Then shouting. Echoing. Oh my God, I whispered to no one. My first instinct wasn't smart or strategic. It was pure animal panic. I grabbed my daughter from the bassinet, clutching her against my chest. She didn't even wake up, just shifted slightly and sighed like I'd disturbed a good dream. I stepped into the hallway, the one spot upstairs without windows, and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I called my husband. "Something's happening," I said the second he answered. "There are gunshots. Like outside." "What? Are you sure?" he said. I could hear machinery humming behind him. "I can hear them. They're right here." There was a pause. "You're probably hearing the scanner." "I'm not," I said. My voice broke. "I know what gunshots sound like." He started to say something else, but I hung up. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "I need you to stay on the phone," I said. "Please. Something's happening outside. There are police everywhere." She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm here." We sat like that for what felt like forever. Me on the hallway floor, my daughter asleep against my chest. Sirens screaming, radios barking orders, boots pounding somewhere outside. At some point, I must have set the phone down. I don't remember doing it. The next thing I remember is it ringing. It was my mom again. "I'm outside," she said. "What?" I whispered. "I'm on your road. Police stopped me, but I told them I was going to my daughter's house. I don't know how long it took her to get there. I just know when she walked up to the front porch, she stopped dead. There are footprints," she said slowly. "Muddy ones. All over your steps, on the door." My legs went weak. Later, after the sun came up, everything made sense. The man had come through the woods behind my house. He'd tried another door, another family. He'd killed again. Then police surrounded the area. The gunfire I heard was the end of it. He died less than 100 yards from where my daughter slept. Sometimes I still wake up in December thinking I hear sirens. Sometimes I check the locks twice without realizing I'm doing it. Because once you know how close danger can get, how quietly it never really leaves you. I remember the first thing that got to me wasn't fear. It was how quiet everything felt. I had been living in that mountain village for a little over 3 years by then. Moved there in late summer, August of 2020, right when the world still felt half broken and nobody really knew what normal was supposed to look like anymore. Before that, I'd lived in a busy part of eastern France, the kind of place where even at night you could hear scooters whining past, people arguing on balconies, dogs barking for no reason. Noise was just part of life. You stopped noticing it. This place was the opposite. The village sat high up, tucked between pine-covered slopes and narrow roads that twisted like someone had spilled string across the mountainside. There was one small grocery store, one cafe that closed before sunset, and a bus that came through so rarely you had to plan your whole day around it. If you stood outside long enough, you could hear the wind moving through the trees, individual branches creaking, snow shifting on rooftops in winter. Silence wasn't just the absence of sound here. It felt like a presence. Our house sat right at the edge of the village, where the paved road gave up and turned into a dirt path that led into the forest. The nearest neighbor was far enough away that at night, their lights looked like distant stars instead of another home, about 300 meters, give or take, close enough to know someone was there. Too far to matter if something went wrong. By mid-December, the snow had already settled in. Not the dramatic, postcard kind, just enough to mute everything. Cars drove slower. Footsteps disappeared. Even sound felt softer, swallowed by white. On December 15th, my parents were in France for work. They'd left early that morning, rushing around the house, reminding me to lock doors, feed the cat, don't forget to text. My sister lived down the road, technically close, but 10 kilometers might as well have been another country at night. The house was mine. And honestly, I liked it. I spent the evening the way I usually did when nobody was around. Headphones on, game controller in hand, voice chat open with friends scattered across different time zones. We joked, trash-talked, argued about stupid things. At some point someone said, "Man, it's already late as hell." And I checked the clock. Almost 2 in the morning. "All right," I said. "I'm done. Gotta crash." "Coward," someone laughed. Yeah. Later, I logged off, the sudden silence almost jarring after hours of voices in my ears. I shut everything down, stretched, and headed upstairs. The house creaked the way old houses do, like it was adjusting to my movement. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, bathroom right next to it, same routine as always. Shower, brush teeth, bed, Nothing dramatic. The water ran hot, steam fogging the mirror. I stood there half asleep, letting the heat loosen my shoulders. When I stepped out, wrapped a towel around myself, everything still felt normal. I brushed my teeth, scrolling through my phone with one hand, barely paying attention. Then something shattered downstairs. Not a bump, not a creak, not the house settling. Glass hitting the floor, breaking. I froze with the toothbrush still in my mouth. My brain did that stupid thing it always does, first trying to explain it away. Maybe I'd left a glass too close to the edge. Maybe the cat knocked something over. Maybe we didn't have a cat anymore. I spit, rinsed my mouth, and stood perfectly still at the top of the stairs. The house felt different now. Not louder, not quieter, just wrong. I waited. 30 seconds, maybe more. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid, grabbed the stair railing and went down slowly, each step deliberate. The kitchen light was off. Moonlight spilled through the window, enough to see the floor. There was a glass shattered near the center of the room. Not near the counter, not near the sink, just there. I crouched down, heart beating a little faster now, and checked around. Windows closed, door locked. Nothing out of place except the glass. I cleaned it up with shaking hands, dropped the pieces in the trash, and stood there for a moment longer, listening. Still nothing. Get a grip, I muttered to myself. I went back upstairs. I hadn't been in the bathroom more than 3 minutes when I heard a voice. A man's voice. Clear, calm, speaking like he was mid-conversation. I killed the light and locked the door without even thinking about it. My chest felt tight, breath shallow. The voice was coming from downstairs, from the kitchen. At first, it sounded like he was on the phone. Nah, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter, he said. Casual, almost bored. I pressed my ear to the door. Then his tone changed. No, that's not what I said. He snapped. Louder, sharper, like an argument had just flipped a switch. Every hair on my arm stood up. This wasn't someone who wandered in by mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was intent. My phone was in my bedroom. So close I could picture it on the nightstand. If I could just make it there. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, unhurried. Each step felt like a punch to the chest. I dropped to the floor, pressing myself flat, trying to disappear. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. A shadow passed beneath the gap. He crouched. I could hear his breathing. Then his eye appeared at the keyhole, blocking the faint light. Is someone in there? He asked. His voice was calm, friendly, even. I didn't move. I know someone's in this house, he said suddenly, his voice rising. And then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not awkward. A deep, genuine laugh that echoed down the hallway. Something in me snapped. The police are already on the way, I screamed. 2 minutes. Silence. Then fast footsteps, running, down the stairs, a door slamming. I stayed on that bathroom floor for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes. When I finally moved, my legs felt weak, like they didn't belong to me. I grabbed my phone and called emergency services. Hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. The police arrived quickly. Lights cutting through the darkness, boots crunching in the snow. They searched the house, the yard, the forest edge. They didn't find him. They did find a bag in the garden. Inside were things that didn't add up. Glue, a flashlight, cigarettes, a Swiss knife. Nothing with a name, nothing with a reason. My parents came back the next day. We changed the locks, installed cameras, added lights, but none of that erased the memory. Sometimes, late at night, I still picture his eye at that keyhole. Calm, curious, like he was just checking to see if someone was home. The house is still quiet, but it never feels empty anymore. I still remember that winter as a stretch of time instead of a set of days. December bled straight into January, January into February, all of it wrapped in the same gray light and early darkness that makes everything feel half asleep. Where I lived back then, winter didn't arrive loudly. It just settled in and refused to leave. Snowbanks hardened along the curbs, boots stayed by the door permanently, and everyone you knew talked about the weather like it was a personal enemy. I was living with my mom and my younger sister at the time, in a quiet neighborhood that looked harmless in daylight. Split-level houses, sagging mailboxes, a couple of pickup trucks that never seemed to move. The kind of place where kids used to play street hockey before winter chased everyone inside. We weren't far from a main road. But once evening hit, the street felt cut off from the rest of the world. That night started like dozens of others. I'd been upstairs in my room scrolling through my phone, half watching the snow fall past the window. It was one of those evenings where the sky went dark around 4:30, but it didn't feel late. My mom and sister were in the living room downstairs, the TV on low, some sitcom rerun playing more for background noise than anything else. The house smelled faintly like burnt popcorn and cold air. I went downstairs to grab a drink, maybe a snack. I don't remember exactly. I remember the sound of the floor creaking under my socks, the hum of the fridge. Normal things. Comforting things. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just a single press, ding-dong, clear and patient. I remember glancing at the clock on the microwave. A little after 6. Too early for it to feel strange. We got people knocking sometimes, roofers leaving flyers, church groups, the occasional neighbor selling something for their kids' school. It was annoying but normal. "I'll get it," I said, already heading for the door. My mom muted the TV. "Probably another flyer," she said. I nodded, already reaching for the handle. When I opened the door, the cold rushed in first, sharp and dry. Then I saw them. 2 men stood on the porch, close enough that I could smell old fabric and winter air. They were both wearing black pea coats, the heavy wool kind with wide collars. Not new ones. The coats looked worn in a way that didn't come from fashion, more like they'd been owned too long. Sleeves slightly shiny at the elbows, buttons dulled with age. The man on the left was heavy-set, broad shoulders, thick neck. His head was almost bald except for a thin fringe of dark hair around the sides. He was holding a Bible against his chest. Black leather, cracked at the corners. It looked heavy, not just in weight but in history, like it had been passed down or carried everywhere. His fingers rested on it carefully, almost reverently. The man on the right was the one who made me pause. He was thinner, taller, with pale blonde hair that looked almost white under the porch light. His face was lined, not old exactly, but worn, like someone who'd spent years squinting into sun or wind. His eyes were the color that gets described as blue but never really is. Too pale, too washed out. Sometimes they looked gray when the light hit them wrong. He smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," he said. Before I could respond, he stepped half an inch closer. Not enough to be rude, but enough to feel intentional. "The world is heavy this time of year," he continued. "Dark comes early. People feel lost." I waited for him to introduce himself, to say a church name, a neighborhood, something. He didn't. "The meek," he said, nodding slightly. "They endure. They wait. They understand what's coming." I blinked. And the earth remembers them," he went on, voice smooth, steady, like he was reciting something memorized long ago. "It remembers who listens and who turns away." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind me, I could feel the living room. My mom and sister were quiet now, listening. "I didn't come here to sell you anything," he said, almost kindly. "I came because some doors open when they're supposed to." I laughed softly, a reflex more than anything. "I think you've got the wrong house." His eyes didn't change. "There's no wrong house," he said, "just timing." The heavy-set man shifted slightly, the Bible creaking as his grip tightened. He didn't look at me. He stared at the pages, flipping one slowly, like he wasn't following along, like he was waiting. The thin man kept talking, about humility, about obedience, about how voices that shout aren't the ones that matter. He never raised his voice, never paused long enough for me to interrupt. It wasn't a conversation. It was a stream. At first, I thought he was just intense, maybe a little off. But then I really looked at his eyes. There was nothing there. Not emptiness exactly, not blankness. It was worse than that. It was like they weren't connected to what he was saying. Like he could have been reading a grocery list and it would have looked the same. No emotion, no curiosity, no reaction to me at all. My stomach tightened. I felt something shift in my chest, a quiet alarm going off without a sound. My heart started beating faster, but my body didn't respond the way it should have. I didn't step back. I didn't close the door. I didn't even fidget. I nodded. I don't remember deciding to. I just did. The thin man noticed. His smile widened slightly. "You feel it," he said. "Most people do. They just don't like to admit it." The porch light hummed softly above us. I tried to speak again. My tongue felt thick, heavy. We're not interested," I managed. He tilted his head, studying me like a specimen. "Interest has nothing to do with it," he said. "Awareness does." Behind me, I heard the faint shift of the couch. My mom later told me she had stood up then, ready to step in, ready to call me back. But something about his voice made her stop. The second man flipped another page. The thin man leaned in just enough that I could see the tiny veins in his eyes. "You're paying attention," he said quietly. "That's good. That's rare." My vision swam. Not spinning, just distant, like everything had moved a few feet farther away. My hands felt numb. I realized I couldn't feel the door handle anymore. I thought, distantly, "This isn't normal." But the thought didn't go anywhere. He talked for what felt like a long time. Minutes, maybe. About judgment that doesn't look like fire. About choosing silence. About how some people are watched longer than others. The heavy-set man never spoke. Finally, without warning, the thin man stepped back. "That's enough for tonight," he said. I blinked. He nodded once, like the decision had been made elsewhere. "Stay warm," he added. I heard myself say, "You too." The door closed. The click of the latch sounded impossibly loud. Everything came rushing back at once. My hands started shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall. My mom was beside me instantly, her face pale. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, and my voice cracked. My sister hovered behind her, eyes wide. "They were creepy," she said. The quiet one kept staring at that book. My mom looked at me. "I almost called you back," she said. But something felt wrong. I nodded. My heart was still racing. We stood there for a long moment, listening. The porch was empty when my mom finally looked through the window. They never came back. But even now, more than a year later, I still think about that night. About the way my body reacted before my mind did. About eyes that didn't look like they belonged to someone standing on a porch in the middle of winter. I've had other people knock on the door since then. Friendly ones, pushy ones, normal ones. None of them ever felt like that. And every December, when the days get short and the light fades early, I find myself listening a little harder when the doorbell rings.